Since the start of the season, I put out a couple different videos covering Bloodspear and Necromancer, and I think we're finally getting to the point where I have all the information out there that you could possibly want. But then it turns out that a bunch of people are running into issues, essence issues, not being able to heal, not being able to cast Bone Prison, so I put out my Mastery of the Bloodspear and Necromancer guide. This is basically breaking down every individual problem that you might have with the build, including timestamps where I go over running out of essence, Bone Prison uptime, the inability to fortify, ways to heal, required gear, how to get the aspects, and then at the end of the video, I even included quite literally just how step-by-step the build works, so you can completely understand all of the mechanisms in place here. And I thought at that point my job was basically done. But there is one outlying issue with the build, and that's that it's bad at doing speed farming. Well, I got news for you. We fixed that too. Because Theory Crafters understood that this build was going to run into similar issues that other Necromancer builds do when they tend to be really good at the pit or really good at killing bosses, is that they tend to have a lot of setup, and that makes it very difficult to take them into easy content. Quite literally, you could be one-shotting Torment 4 bosses and then run into Helltide and not be able to kill anything. And while that doesn't make sense off the rip, once you realize the issue with the build, it actually is very intuitive. Things that are good at doing the pit just typically aren't good at doing other content. And since the majority of what you need to do to be able to supplement your gear, masterwork, be able to temper your stuff, and basically get gear to actually go run the pit with, all requires you to be good at speed farming, to be good at killing density. And Bone Spear is great at killing density, but when you tie everything to overpower in a cooldown like Bone Prison, that could be hard to handle. But by the end of this solo 10-wave run, I got nearly 800 cinders, more than enough to get all of the gear out of the box and get a ton of crafting materials. In a Necromancer build that is supposedly bad at speed farming, supposedly bad at clearing out density, supposedly is bad due to being tied to cooldowns, getting a solo 800 cinder run here is actually pretty impressive. But obviously that's not the only content in the game. And on top of that, I then iterated on the build further and made it even better for this. But the Helltide is probably the most demanding content in the game for speed outside of Undercity runs, where the small packs of monsters are dispersed far enough away where you don't have these long, prolonged, or drawn out combat scenarios. You basically have to one-tap them and move on. And if, again, you are tied to the cooldown of Bone Prison, as well as basically killing yourself if you spam your Bloodspear too often, you're going to run into issues. But like I very confidently put forward, I think that we've solved that for you. But there are a lot of huge upsides to being able to play on a speed farm setup of this build that might not necessarily be immediately understood. But I'll include a link to this planner as well. It's already in the planner, which I currently have. It's just a different variant. I'll go ahead and include the link so that it's not difficult for you to find. So let's talk about the speed farming setup for this build, the fact that it's actually cheaper than the endgame version of this build, and you basically don't have to really swap out anything other than a few aspects and a couple skill points, which luckily in the Armory makes this a breeze. Now, there is both a cheap version of this cheap version and a more expensive version of this cheap version that we can touch on, and that mostly comes down to a single rune word. But there are a couple of differences in this build that are immediately apparent. First, you're going to see the fact that there are no mythics on this setup, and in fact, the mythic gear that you would typically use for the build actually just makes you worse at speed farming, as hilarious as that is. The first thing you're going to notice is that we're still using a legendary armor, and what we've put on here is actually Aspect of the Void. The addition of Void here, as well as the ability to temper on Corpse Tendril size on a second piece of gear, means that you can reach the total cap of 100% increased sized. And I don't know if you've ever seen the difference between a regular Corpse Tendrils and a 100% increased sized Corpse Tendrils, but you basically pull the entire screen. This allows you to Bone Prison onto enemies, start killing them, and immediately spam a Corpse Tendrils as you start running by. And then once the rest of the monsters all get pulled into that same Bone Prison, you just gun behind you a few times and you clear them out. This is where we start to gain a huge amount of the efficiency that's required to speed farm. You notice that we did add Blood Mist. The great part about Blood Mist is that if you pick the first modifier on the left, you actually gain movement speed while in Blood Mist. And since this build typically uses Path of Trigul, there's not a lot of great places to be able to gain mobility. And these boots themselves don't offer a whole bunch of it, but being able to gain that additional movement speed while in Blood Mist, as well as having a few shadow skills on your bar for Reaper's Pursuit, you can actually hit movement speed cap. But this Void aspect is going to be working with Plunging Darkness. Darkness. Plunging Darkness is going to make it so that your Bone Prison now casts Blight in the center of it, and Void will then pull monsters into that center area. It's what you saw during the gameplay. The primary reason, though, why we want to bump back over to another legendary ring is actually to get more ranks of rapid ossification. Now, I talked about this in the Master the Blood Spear video, but just for people who missed it, rapid ossification is an incredibly powerful tool for being able to manage your Bone Prison uptime. If I were to very quickly spam even into a single character while I have Bone Prison up, you'll notice that I'm able to cast Bone Prison incredibly rapidly. Basically every other second or so, I could recast Bone Prison if I need to. And that is strictly because I have so many ranks to rapid ossification. While the initial roll of rapid ossification on your amulet as well as your rings will only be +2, once you masterwork the item in general, this will naturally bump up to 3. And with 12 total ranks, so 3 in from yourself and then 9 in from your gear, you will reduce the cooldown of bone skills by 6 seconds after casting 4 bone spears. Because my bone spear itself, if I don't have a proc on, is going to cost 27 essence. That means 4 casts of these will reduce the cooldown of Bone Prison by 6 seconds. So just casting it, spamming through Bone Spear one time, and then casting again every 4 casts of Bone Spear, you're able to do this. Add on a few extra lucky hit procs from Decrepify, and even in big packs of monsters where you haven't dropped a Bone Prison yet, you'll be able to spam it very quickly. This is how we gain an even larger return on our efficiency here. But remember, our Bone Prison will now be dropping Blight in the center of it. Blight will now be pulling via Void. This is going to act as a mini corpse tendrils, getting a couple bodies into your Bone Prison immediately, start firing on them, immediately cast corpse tendrils itself. Then as you're running by, you're able to kill them off and then move on to the next pack where you're already able to respawn. The last little addition that I made here is rather than using the Cax rune to be able to further increase our damage, which would also make it harder for you to maintain resource, we're actually just going to go with Cure and Lum. Cure and Lum says every 5 times you cast a skill, you're going to fully refill the entirety of your essence orb. And what this basically means is that you should never run out of essence, even if, again, you get caught in a weird scenario where you don't have Soul Rift uptime, or you can't spam your Bone Prison, or you're just kind of running around and you misfired a couple shots. You should basically always be topped off, because this, in addition to a lucky hit chance, is basically 100% uptime on 100% resource. So speed farming setup is going to drop Blight. It's going to pick up Blood Mist, like I just said. You also notice that we're going to take out some of the points from the lucky hit chance here and make sure that we have the 3 points into rapid ossification. This is all linked in the planner. You can check that out after the video. But then the other thing that I want to talk about is actually the boss power. So you can either be using Grigor, or if you've managed to kill Lilith, you can use Lilith's ability. Lilith's ability will actually push back targets a little bit, meaning that they'll stay in your Bone Prison for a bit longer. But it's actually the modifiers that we want to swap out here. Lord Zir's Blood Pool says after activating your main boss power, which both Grigor and Lilith's are both incredibly easy to actually trigger, you will begin healing. This means that basically you could hit a target even when it's outside of your Bone Prison, and then as long as you're not just spamming into the distance, choosing not to kill stuff, you will actually out-heal the damage that you're doing to yourself. We're also going to be using Blackmailer's Sabotage. This says that when you gain Fortify, you're going to gain Barrier. Because we're killing mobs so quickly, you don't typically have 100% uptime on Soul Rift, and if a lot of people are relying on Soul Rift's Barrier to be able to stay alive, this is just a nice little supplement for that. And then lastly, we are staying on Outlaw Sharpshooters here. You could use a couple different options depending on what you still need. So let's say you need some attack speed, you could toss it over to Torusks here. If you actually needed some additional crit chance, like you didn't even want to be casting Corpse Tendrils for whatever reason, you could pop this on to be able to hit crit chance cap as well. And even just something like Alex here to be able to gain some movement speed just in case your gear isn't really up to snuff or you still feel like you are trailing behind a little bit. Just remember that at least having the 3 skills on your bar, which are now shadow skills, because Bone Prison will become a shadow skill as well, that's already 3 for Reaper's Pursuit, which is going to grant you 18% movement speed for free completely. You can also continue to put points into lucky hit chance here as opposed to one of the other damage multipliers if you really want to. Remember that the Armory is now in the game, so you can have a push setup for a build as well as a speed setup for a build, and you can use these to great effect. The thing that I would most typically recommend to you is basically having the essence generation rune word in the chest piece that you're going to swap on. Your chest piece can also have essence per second, which can help to go even further to be able to offset any essence issues that you would have. And again, since typically at the end game you're going to be using a Ring of Starless Skies as opposed to legendary ring, you can put the legendary ring over here with the aspects that you need. So you can have the chest piece with your essence generation rune word in it with the void aspect on it. You can have your ring with plunging darkness on it. So when you swap over over your armory. You don't have to like swap out gems or rune words or anything like that. It can just be swapped very easily. So you can use that to quickly go from pushing in the pit to getting back into the Infernal Horde to actually get the masterworking materials that you need to push in the pit. And then the only other tidbit that I have for you to be able to swap over to a speed farming setup is actually in using Variana. Variana has a thing that says if you attack targets that she has caused to start bleeding, you're going to heal. So again, this is just another system in addition to Lord Seer Blood Pool, just to be able to offset any misguided bone spears that don't connect, don't overpower, and end up draining life. It's a great way to basically make it so that you can't screw up staying alive, which means that you can't screw up going fast. So that's what I got for you on this build. I've been taking it in soloing Torment for bosses. I've been actually being able to farm in the Infernal Horde and actually participate in that. This definitely helps a ton in the Helltide. It helps a ton in Nightmare Dungeons. In any content that can be similar to a pit, you're just going to be better at doing it, because at the point where you have even the gear that I have right now, which is not very impressive, and it's not even fully ancestral. I keep remembering that these are just random gloves that I got. Like, I don't even know. I think maybe 3 or 4 hours into the season going live. But at this point, your gear, if it looks anything like mine, is going to be crushing pit content, so everything else is trivial. You just need to make yourself faster at casting skills and faster at managing resources, and you got this in the bag. Now, I'm not going to try to blow smoke here. Bone Spear is still a pit pushing build, a bossing build, and while it's S tier and potentially our strongest S tier build in that regard, it is nowhere near that when it comes to speed farming. I would put it at high B tier, maybe low A tier. As we continue to innovate on it, there are definitely going to be some ways to be able to get that even faster. Like once I get a jaw rune, I'll be able to teleport, getting me more movement speed. As my gear gets better, just managing all my systems will get better. Multiple GA items could even get me like more cooldown reduction on Bone Prison, etc. But I'm not going to demand that you have that kind of stuff to be able to have a good time. I just want you to be able to have a realistic time, because the build's strong. We can make it do speed farming better, but that's definitely not its strong suit. If these things help you to be able to enjoy the season better and be able to enjoy this build better, and you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel. It would mean the world to me. Thank you so much to everybody who has. I think in the past day, we've gained like 1,000 subscribers, which is an amount of growth I have not experienced in many months. So thank you all very much. That's incredibly kind of you. I appreciate that you appreciate the content, and I'm glad they can help you out. Leave a like on the video, leave a comment. Have you come across any new bugs, any weird interactions? Have you been trying out different optimizations? Or have you yourself come up with some Giga Chad way to be able to fix this build for all content? I'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much to everybody who typically comments. It really does help the video to get a lot more engagement and get out to people who might otherwise not see it. And that would be a shame, because I think that we're sharing some pretty good wisdom here, and I don't want people to be having a bad time just because they haven't come across it. But that's enough of me yapping. Thank you so much for watching this video. I truly, truly hope that it helps, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.